Hey, brother. Sorry I bailed on you last night. Had to keep the wife happy. Um, so I want to go over your punch list there with questions. Let's start with kind of the simple thing, shaving piston teeth. So this is an old DSG piston, obviously, and you can see that I removed the teeth off the backside. I don't really think that's necessary. This is a spare piston that I can use in a DSG if I want to, or a single sector if I decide to do that. There is another place where you do need to shave teeth, but I'm going to kind of do that in a separate chapter here. Let's just weigh some of these. I think this is Matrix, but it's like an SHS knockoff. So 12.6 basically with removed teeth, 13.6. So it's literally 1 gram heavier with the difference in teeth. I don't know if the Matrix itself is lighter though, because it is a different brand. There's some other piston stuff here. There's 6.6 grams just for a piston head, right? Let me find a plastic one. Versus a palm piston at 3.8, right? So that's a big weight difference right there. You got 3 grams difference between a plastic head and a metal head. So if you are going to save weight on a piston, do it on the head itself. Just for shits and giggles, this is an old G&P. It's their old style with that big metal washer in the back. Check that out. That's 11.3 just on the piston head itself. The piston's only 12.6, right? This is an assembled G&P, and they've got plastic teeth, so lightweight, right? 27.4 because they got that big metal block in there, right? This is a fully assembled piston with a palm head and a full metal rack at 24, right? This is 27. So there's 3 grams different, and they both have a palm head. So you can imagine how much this thing is going to weigh with a metal head on it, right? That's a monster of a piston, right? So the logic there is if you shave these teeth off, the piston's going to move faster and help you avoid PME. I really don't think that's true anymore. There probably was a point in time where that was true. You know, when you're using old pistons like this with lead weights in the front. But nowadays these pistons have evolved so much that I just don't think it's necessary anymore. This is SHS. This is Matrix, but I think it's an SHS knockoff. This is a Kratos. Kratos is a little heavy compared to this Aztec, so that's 25.3 on the Kratos. That's a gate piston head. I've been liking those recently, and I'll explain that to you later. This is Aztec. I haven't used it yet, but I am curious to try it out. It doesn't have any reviews, so I don't really know how to gauge it. But Aztec makes some pretty decent stuff, in my opinion, so I'm curious to try this out. I'm going to run this in my DSG, actually. This has always, Kratos has always worked for me. It's always been reliable. But they are expensive. They're 32 bucks or whatever. These Aztecs are like 20 something. So if it is a reliable piston, I'd like to know. SHS is also a good option. Like I said, this has been DSG'd, and obviously it's been used. Probably for 10, 20,000 rounds, you know. So SHS, Matrix are not bad options. I think they are a little cheap and chintzy, but I mean, it didn't break, so no complaints. I am curious to try this out though, this Aztec. So this is, I forget the brand, but it's like a mushroom head. Again, 13.5 grams just on the head itself. I do use, so I like palm heads on my high-speed builds, but I do use metal heads for my DMR builds. That metal slug kind of adds a little extra weight at the end of the cycle, so you get a little bit of joule creep from it. So that's kind of my philosophy on the shading teeth topic. Let's get into some PME stuff. There you go. So, you know, this is your normal cycle, right? I'm going to cycle and then release, right? There's absolutely no way that you're ever going to catch these surplus teeth on this side. Once you release right there, that piston is already traveling back into the cylinder. So if anywhere you're going to get PME would be right here as the piston is coming back forward and the sector gear catches it mid-cycle. That's where you're going to hit PME. And the idea that these extra teeth are going to slow that piston down so much that it can't cycle forward in time, I just don't think that's the case. I mean, you're not going to hurt anything by removing these extra teeth. You're not going to damage anything. I just don't think it's necessary. And then the other downside, like I said last night, is that this is only ever a DSG piston. So if I decide I don't want to build my DSG for whatever reason, and I just want to switch it back to a single sector, I just wasted a piston. That's perfectly fine. Like, it's still perfectly usable. It just has 6 teeth on it. So PME, obviously there's a lot of different variables there. The main factors are your sector gear tooth count. Not so much how many teeth you have on your piston, but the number of teeth you have on your sector gear. If you're using 9-tooth, 8-tooth, 7-tooth, whatever. And then your mainspring. So if you're using 9 teeth on a sector gear, right? Siege Tech makes a 9-tooth DSG. And let's say you're using like a 125 spring, right? What happens is that 125 travels pretty slow. So there's your piston, right? And you've got 9 teeth, so you've got an extra tooth on this side, and it's coming right back around. So that's where if you're using 9 teeth, you got to up your spring to, you know, a 160 or a 170. I think I've never really had good luck with a 9-tooth. I think 8-tooth is pretty much the maximum tooth count, realistically. I know guys that do use a 9-tooth. Some of my tech buddies are using 9-tooth on a 170 spring, which I think is crazy. But it works for them, so hats off to you. I kind of like the 8-tooth setup. If I do go to a 170 spring, I like my 6-tooth or my 7-tooth for that. 7-tooth gets a little more FPS, but it is kind of dicey with PME, just because you do have that extra tooth. And the heavier your spring, obviously, the more catastrophic PME is going to be. So the other part of PME is AOE correction, and they kind of go hand in hand. Let me zoom in on this real quick. I think you can see that. So what you're looking for on AOE is that nice mesh right there between the pickup tooth and on the piston and the pickup tooth on the sector gear. That's what you're looking for with AOE. There's a couple different ways to do it. I have always done it with this method where, and like I said, this is used so you can see the wear and tear on it. I'm trying to zoom in on that. Yeah, there you go. Where you're correcting the face of this pickup tooth. This is the first time I've actually started using spacers, and so far it is working. I haven't done enough cycles to say for sure, but this is a gate head, and I've really been liking these. They have a little plastic washer that comes with the head that pushes this piston farther back out of the cylinder, right? So you can see where that meshes pretty well, okay? Let me grab this other piston here real quick. Get out of there. Dude. Airsoft. Okay, so this is another piston. This is actually up my fiance's DMR. This one looks a lot cleaner. You can see where I've changed the angle on that pickup tooth a little bit. This one does not have a spacer on the front. So let's look at the difference there. So this is going to sit farther into the cylinder. I've corrected the pickup angle on that tooth, right? So it actually meshes pretty well where it does pick up. You can see that, right? That meshes pretty well. And then you start catching your teeth. Yada yada, you get the idea. The difference is that if you're correcting your AOE with the angle of the tooth, you're actually picking it up right about there. You're picking it up at the 1 o'clock position. And it still meshes correctly, right? But you're picking it up farther forward. If you use a spacer, you're picking it up more at the 12 o'clock position. And either way, you can make that tooth, you can make those teeth mesh together. It just depends on if you want to pick up at 1 o'clock or at 12 o'clock. I've always done my AOE correction on that tooth, but recently I've had some PME issues where because you're picking up right here, that piston has to cycle completely forward, and it's really, sometimes it's a really close window. And I actually have had some PME issues, destroyed a Kratos out of my last DSG build. And I think that was part of the cause. Versus having that spacer on there where that piston is stopping farther back, so your sector gear has more time to come around and catch that pickup tooth. So like I said, I'm pretty new to the spacer method, but it does make sense to me. And depending on how these experiments go, I'll let you know how it works out, but I think that's probably the method that I'm going to keep using from now on. There are some guys who will add a sorbo pad to the inside of the cylinder. I would discourage you from doing that. You could probably get away with it for a DMR, but even then, I just don't think it's a good practice. The problem is that when you have multiple, like you already have a sorbo pad on pretty much any cylinder, you know, it's always going to have that sorbo pad on it. But when you start stacking on additional sorbo pads, you create like a trampoline effect where that piston just needs to go back, forward, back, forward, back, forward. But you start creating a trampoline effect where it's going back, bouncing, coming back, bouncing. And that's just a recipe for disaster, especially on a DSG. So that's AOE correction. This is where I mentioned earlier, shaving teeth. This second tooth in does need to be shaved down if it's not already. I think SHS comes that way from the factory. No, they don't. I had to do this one. Trying to get this to, yeah, there you go, focus. They shave down their first one, but they leave their second one full height. Where's my Aztec? I think, did this one come? Nope, this one didn't come that way. I had to shave that one as well. Some brands do, I thought, maybe not. Yeah, I guess most of them come with that full second tooth on there. So what happens when you have that full second tooth So this is a stock GMP. Let's throw that in there real quick because it has that second tooth from the factory. Let me zoom in real quick. So this I'm going to catch, right? See what happens to that second tooth? Like I'm sitting right on top of it. So on a high-speed build, it's really easy to catch that second tooth in right when you pick up the piston. So you don't want to remove it completely. You still want that sector gear to be able to engage it. You just shave it down about halfway. So let's plug this in. I guess I'll use this one. Yeah, this one works. So now let's watch what happens there. I'm going to catch that pickup and see how I'm clearing that second tooth. Like there's no way it's ever going to interfere right there. Once it gets rolling, it still engages the sector teeth. So it's still a usable tooth, but I just don't want my tooth to catch it right there. Where this is coming up and it might catch the top of that number 2 tooth. Does that make sense? So you just want to be able to clear right there. But then once you start running, it will lock in and do its job. So cycle repeats, slams forward, all that good stuff. All right. So I think that covers the AOE side of things. This is the Aztec again. So I've shaved the second tooth down, but I didn't do any angle correction on the pickup tooth itself. Trying to get that to focus. There you go. You can see that I haven't corrected the angle on the pickup itself. I'm correcting the angle with that spacer up front. So I think that covers it. Let's talk about a few other things. While you're dremeling shit, this is a good practice for DSG. You don't really need it for DMR or anything like that, but for DSG, it's a pretty good practice. Just add that little groove into your ARL. And the advantage to doing that is as this comes around, you can see that groove is allowing my bevel gear to kind of roll around, right? So that ARL is engaged longer and engaged more precisely, versus if you're using a flat bevel or a flat ARL, I'm locked in right there, but without that groove in there, as soon as this starts spinning, that ARL is way out there, and then it takes a long time to catch back in. So just kind of makes everything a little more efficient. This one I didn't do a really great job on, but you get the idea. You can kind of round this out a little bit more than it already is, but that's a good practice. And then just test it in the top half of your gearbox just so you can see the meshing. You get the idea though. So that's all right. That covers your AOE, the shaving tooth question, tappet plates. Let's look at that real quick. The golden number here for tappet length is 11 millimeters, and that's from this point to this point. This one, you can see that I left a little long. It's probably like 13 millimeters. Look at the back though. So that's backspin from the sector gear catching it after it's cycled. So the sector gear pulls it back, piston cycles. This thing is trying to move forward, but that sector gear pin is hitting the ass end of that tappet plate. So that's why you're cutting it down. This one I had the same failure, but I just cut it a little shorter, so I don't have that issue anymore. I did have it at one point, but I just shaved it down. So this one obviously needs to get trimmed down a little bit as well. The other place where you can shave if you need to, that just depends on the build, is this face a little bit. If you need to correct your nozzle distance into your hop up. But that's a separate issue. That doesn't have anything to do with DSG. That's just airsoft in general. These are tappet springs. You can see the black one is shorter. And so I've removed, I don't know, 4 or 5 coils, and then also folded over 2 coils on each end. So this would be a DSG tappet spring. Would be a normal tappet spring. Your piston is only coming halfway back, and it's also moving twice as fast. So you need your tappet to keep up with your piston. So add tension to your spring. Otherwise you get, it's called tappet PME, which isn't as catastrophic. The only thing it'll destroy is just your tappet plate. But it's where your tappet plate can't cycle forward fast enough before the sector gear does another revolution. So piston PME destroys the piston, tappet PME destroys the tappet, if that makes sense. What else? You had a couple other things on here. Oh, yeah. Glue. So I've tried every species of glue out there and ran into the same issues that you're having. I had red Loctite on my warhead, and it lasted about a week before the pinion just wiggled its way off. I heard a lot of guys talking about this, so I gave it a shot. Had the same problem with it. Supposedly it's like the world's best glue, but I had the same problem with the pinion gear just working its way off because I didn't use the primer. And you got to get both. You do. This stuff is cool. This stuff is actually pretty wicked. So this is an activator. Inactive metals like aluminum, stainless steel, anything powder coated, inactive metals really don't bond to glue. They're not going to bond to super glue. They're not going to bond to epoxy, anything like that. They're just designed to repel. That's why they don't rust. That's why they're hard to paint. They're just designed to not stick to shit. So this kind of etches that material. And with this green Loctite stuff is pretty wicked, actually. I started doing my bearings with that as well. It's really thin, so it's not like a epoxy where it's, a millimeter thick. So if you put your bearings in with epoxy, they're sticking up out of the receiver or out of the gearbox. It's super thin. It's like paper thin. So you can put that bearing fully into place without like a layer of glue between it and the gearbox. This stuff is pretty cool. So Loctite 638. They make a Loctite 648 that I haven't tried. Some guys say that is better, but pretty much anyone that I've talked to says they're both ideal. So I haven't tried the 648. I don't really know for sure, but I'm pretty happy with the 638. Just make sure you get the clean and prime, and that's your part number. You can get it on Amazon. You can get both on Amazon, I should say. So I think that, okay, I got your list here. Piston weight, tappet shaving, AOE correction, we covered Loctite, and then ARL. So I think that's a wrap. Hopefully it helps. Talk to you later, brother.